There's a machine that didn't just end lives, it changed them. Between 1792 and 1794, the guillotine became more than an execution device in revolutionary France. It became a psychological weapon that transformed how people spoke, dressed, walked through the streets, and even expressed their thoughts in the privacy of their own homes. This wasn't just about terror, it was about control through predictability. Every day, crowds gathered at the Place de la Révolution to watch the blade fall. They knew the schedule, they knew the process, they knew that anyone could be next. The guillotine's efficiency made it impossible to ignore. Unlike older methods of execution that were unpredictable, prolonged, or reserved for specific classes, this machine was fast, public, and egalitarian in the darkest sense of the word. It killed aristocrats and commoners with equal precision. The question we often miss when studying the French Revolution isn't just who died under the guillotine, it's how the living changed their entire existence to avoid it. How did the constant presence of this machine reshape daily behavior? How did people adapt their language, their clothing, their social interactions, and even their silences to survive in a society where a single accusation could lead to the scaffold? This video explores the obscure behavioral transformations that occurred not on the platform of the guillotine, but in the streets, homes, and minds of those who lived under its shadow. The guillotine was introduced in France in April 1792, designed by Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotine as a humane and egalitarian form of capital punishment. Before this, executions varied by social class. Nobles were beheaded by sword, commoners were hanged, and traitors faced prolonged tortures. The revolution demanded equality, even in death. The machine delivered that promise with mechanical consistency. By 1793, France had entered the Reign of Terror, led by the Committee of Public Safety under Maximilien Robespierre. The Revolutionary Tribunal operated with shocking speed, processing trials in hours rather than days. Accusations of being an enemy of the Republic, a term deliberately vague, could come from neighbors, colleagues, or anonymous denunciations. The tribunal convicted over 17,000 people during the Terror, though the actual death toll from revolutionary violence reached much higher. The guillotine stood permanently erected in major city squares, primarily in Paris. It wasn't hidden, it was central, visible, inescapable. Executions occurred in the morning, often multiple per day during peak periods. The machine became a fixture of urban life, as ordinary as a market or fountain. This wasn't accidental. The revolutionaries understood that visibility created deterrence. The guillotine's presence in public space meant that revolutionary justice was always watching, always ready. Citizens couldn't forget, even for a moment, that the Republic had the power to end lives swiftly and publicly. This constant awareness formed the foundation of behavioral change across French society. Walk through Paris in 1793, and you'd notice something unsettling. People moved differently, they spoke differently, they even dressed differently. The fear of the guillotine wasn't abstract or distant. It manifested in observable, measurable changes in how citizens conducted themselves in public spaces. Crowds at executions weren't always there by choice. Attendance at public executions became an informal test of revolutionary loyalty. Not attending could raise suspicion, but showing the wrong reaction, too much sympathy or too little enthusiasm, could be equally dangerous. People learned to maintain neutral expressions, to clap at appropriate moments, to demonstrate civic participation without revealing personal feelings. This careful performance extended beyond execution days. In cafes, theaters, and markets, citizens developed a hyper-awareness of their surroundings. Conversations that once flowed freely became guarded and coded. Political discussions happened in whispers or not at all. Even in private homes, families spoke carefully, aware that servants, neighbors, or even children might report suspicious statements. The physical posture of Parisians changed. People avoided eye contact with strangers. They walked with purpose, minimizing loitering that might attract attention. Gatherings became smaller and more controlled. The spontaneous street life that characterized pre-revolutionary Paris diminished significantly. This wasn't paranoia, it was rational adaptation. The mechanisms of denunciation were real and efficient. The Committee of Public Safety encouraged citizens to report suspicious behavior, creating an informant network that penetrated every level of society. The characteristic you need to understand is this: the guillotine's impact was not limited to its victims. It created a society of performed loyalty, where every gesture carried political meaning. Why did the guillotine change behavior so effectively? The answer lies in its functional characteristics and how they created psychological pressure. First, speed. The guillotine killed in seconds. From the moment a person ascended the platform to the blade's fall, rarely exceeded 2 minutes. This efficiency meant high throughput. During peak periods, the machine processed dozens of executions per day. The speed conveyed inevitability. There was no time for last-minute pardons, no possibility of escape, no room for intervention. Once the tribunal convicted you, the machine would claim you with mechanical certainty. Second, publicity. Executions occurred in major squares at predictable times. The guillotine's permanent presence meant citizens encountered it regularly in their daily routines. You couldn't avoid walking past it. You couldn't forget it existed. This constant visibility created ambient anxiety. The machine was always there, waiting. Third, equality. The guillotine didn't discriminate. It killed King Louis XVI, Queen Marie Antoinette, revolutionary leaders like Georges Danton and Robespierre himself, along with thousands of ordinary citizens. This democratic quality of the machine meant nobody was safe. Aristocratic privilege couldn't save you. Revolutionary credentials couldn't protect you. The machine reduced everyone to the same final moment. Fourth, rationality. Unlike mob violence or irregular executions, the guillotine operated within a legal framework, however distorted. The Revolutionary Tribunal provided a veneer of judicial process. This systematization made the terror more predictable and therefore more manageable. People believed they could avoid the guillotine by following rules, displaying loyalty, and avoiding suspicion. This belief, whether accurate or not, shaped behavior more effectively than random violence ever could. The guillotine's shadow fell most heavily on how people communicated. Language became dangerous. Revolutionary France developed elaborate verbal codes and restrictions that governed acceptable speech. Citizens adopted revolutionary vocabulary compulsively. Traditional forms of address like monsieur and madame disappeared, replaced by citoyen and citoyenne, citizen. Using old aristocratic titles, even accidentally, could mark you as counter-revolutionary. The revolutionary calendar replaced traditional dates and months with new names celebrating nature and reason rather than saints and kings. Failing to use correct dates signaled dangerous attachment to the old regime. Political opinions required careful calibration. Expressing support for the revolution wasn't enough. You needed to demonstrate the correct intensity of support. Too moderate, and you risked accusation of being a Girondin or moderate who secretly opposed revolutionary progress. But excessive radicalism could also be dangerous if political winds shifted. Many who called for more extreme measures found themselves on the scaffold when power dynamics changed. Silence became its own form of communication. In meetings, cafes, and public gatherings, people learned when to speak and when to remain quiet. Silence could indicate agreement or neutrality, but prolonged silence might suggest secret opposition. Citizens navigated this impossible balance daily. Written communication became especially fraught. Letters could be intercepted. Diaries could be discovered. Even private papers might be seized during searches. Many people stopped keeping personal records entirely. Those who continued wrote in vague terms, avoiding names and specific opinions. Revolutionary tribunals accepted denunciations based on verbal testimony, often without corroboration. A neighbor's claim that you spoke critically of the revolution could initiate your arrest. This created profound distrust in social relationships and fundamentally altered how people expressed themselves in every context. Clothing became political. Appearance communicated loyalty or suspicion. The guillotine's threat forced citizens to carefully construct their visual presentation to avoid attracting dangerous attention. Aristocratic fashion disappeared almost overnight. Elaborate wigs, silk stockings, ornate jackets, and other markers of noble status became dangerous to wear. Those who possessed such items hid or destroyed them. Appearing too wealthy or refined could trigger accusations of being an aristocrat or aristocrat sympathizer. Revolutionary citizens adopted the dress of working people. The sans-culotte, literally without knee breeches, represented the revolutionary ideal. Long trousers instead of aristocratic breeches, simple jackets, and the red Phrygian cap became the uniform of revolutionary loyalty. Even those from comfortable backgrounds dressed down to demonstrate solidarity with the working class. Women's fashion underwent similar transformation. Elaborate dresses, powdered hair, and jewelry became suspect. Simple, modest clothing in patriotic colors, particularly the revolutionary tricolor of blue, white, and red, signaled appropriate values. Women wore tricolor ribbons and cockades as visible markers of revolutionary support. The cockade, a circular ribbon arrangement in revolutionary colors, became mandatory for all citizens. Failing to wear a cockade in public could result in immediate confrontation or arrest. Citizens checked each other's clothing for this symbol. Its absence suggested counter-revolutionary sympathies. Interestingly, some people developed what we might call protective camouflage. They deliberately cultivated rough, working-class appearances, even in private settings, understanding that consistency was crucial. Being caught in aristocratic clothing at home during a search could be as damaging as wearing it publicly. The guillotine thus reached into people's wardrobes and transformed how an entire society dressed itself. Personal style became subordinate to survival strategy. Several common myths exist about how the guillotine's fear functioned. Let's address the most persistent misconceptions. Myth 1. Everyone lived in constant terror, unable to function normally. This exaggerates reality. While fear was pervasive, daily life continued. Markets operated, theaters performed, plays, businesses functioned. The terror wasn't total paralysis, but rather careful navigation. People adapted and found ways to maintain routines while managing risk. Most citizens weren't arrested. The 17,000 official executions during the Terror, while horrific, represented a small fraction of France's population of 28 million. Many people never personally knew someone guillotined. The fear came not from statistical probability, but from unpredictability. Anyone could be next, but most people weren't. Myth 2. Only aristocrats and obvious counter-revolutionaries feared the guillotine. Actually, committed revolutionaries often faced the greatest danger. The revolution consumed its own leaders repeatedly. Robespierre himself, architect of the Terror, died under the guillotine. Revolutionary credentials provided no protection. This reality made the fear more pervasive because proper behavior couldn't guarantee safety. Myth 3. People who kept their heads down and stayed silent were safe. Silence itself could be suspicious. The revolution demanded active participation and visible enthusiasm. Neutrality wasn't an option. Citizens needed to attend revolutionary festivals, serve in civic positions, and demonstrate ongoing commitment. Passive survival wasn't possible. Myth 4. The guillotine's psychological impact ended with the Terror. Actually, the behavioral changes persisted long after Robespierre's fall in July 1794. The habits of careful speech, political caution, and distrust of authority continued for years. Some argue these behavioral patterns influenced French political culture for generations. The guillotine's shadow extended far beyond its active use. The guillotine's behavioral impact varied significantly across France and throughout the revolutionary period. Not everyone experienced the Terror identically. Paris experienced the most intense concentration of executions and surveillance. The capital hosted the Revolutionary Tribunal and served as the political center. Parisians lived under the most direct observation. Provincial cities had their own tribunals and guillotines, but operated with varying intensity. Lyon, Marseille, and Nantes saw significant terror activity. Rural areas, particularly those distant from major cities, experienced less immediate pressure. In some regions, traditional authorities and social structures persisted beneath a surface layer of revolutionary compliance. Temporal variation was equally significant. The early revolutionary period, from 1789 to 1792, featured relatively little systematic terror. The guillotine existed, but wasn't yet central to political control. The Reign of Terror proper, from September 1793 to July 1794, represented the peak of fear-driven behavioral change. After Robespierre's execution in July 1794, the Thermidorian reaction brought rapid relaxation. Citizens quickly shed the most extreme behavioral restrictions. Fashion became more elaborate again. Speech became freer. The constant performance of revolutionary enthusiasm diminished. However, caution persisted. Political winds had shifted before and could shift again. Social class also mediated the experience. Working class, sans-culottes, the revolution's base, faced less scrutiny of their behavior than former nobles or wealthy merchants. A laborer could speak more freely than a banker. Regional political cultures mattered too. Areas with strong royalist sympathies faced more intense Republican pressure. Regions that enthusiastically supported the revolution experienced less internal suspicion. The guillotine's behavioral impact was universal in principle but variable in practice, shaped by location, timing, and social position. So why did the guillotine change behavior so profoundly? The answer returns us to the machine's essential characteristics and how they created a comprehensive system of behavioral control. The guillotine succeeded not through random violence, but through predictable efficiency. Its speed, publicity, and egalitarian operation created rational fear. Citizens understood the rules, even if those rules were arbitrary. They believed they could influence their fate through careful behavior. This belief, whether accurate or illusory, gave them agency. That sense of possible control shaped their actions more effectively than helpless terror ever could. The machine represented the state's power made visible and tangible. Every time citizens passed the scaffold, they encountered physical proof of the Republic's ability to end lives instantly and legally. This wasn't abstract government authority. It was concrete, mechanical, immediate. The behavioral changes we've explored weren't irrational panic. They were sophisticated survival strategies. People adapted their language, appearance, social interactions, and public performances to navigate a dangerous political environment. They developed new skills in reading social situations, managing self-presentation, and maintaining protective ambiguity. What the guillotine's obscure characteristic reveals is this: state power doesn't need to be used constantly to be effective. The machine's presence, its efficiency, and its predictability created the conditions for self-regulation. Citizens monitored their own behavior and each other's, often more strictly than any surveillance apparatus could have achieved alone. The guillotine was a tool of social engineering as much as execution. It transformed not just who lived and died, but how the survivors lived. It reached into private spaces, personal relationships, and individual thoughts. The blade that fell in public spaces cast shadows that extended into every corner of revolutionary French society. The guillotine's last public execution in France occurred in 1939, but its use continued privately until 1977. The machine itself has long been retired, preserved now in museums as a historical artifact. But the behavioral patterns it created during the Revolution offer lasting lessons about how fear shapes societies. When we study the French Revolution, we often focus on dramatic moments: the storming of the Bastille, the execution of the king, the rise and fall of revolutionary leaders. These events matter, but they don't tell the complete story. The Revolution's impact on ordinary people, on how they spoke and dressed and moved through their days, reveals something deeper about the nature of political power. Fear is most effective when it's internalized. The guillotine didn't need guards at every corner or informants in every household. The machine's visible presence and efficient operation created a system where people regulated themselves. They performed loyalty because the alternative was too dangerous to contemplate. This dynamic appears throughout history and continues in modern contexts. Surveillance states, whether through technology or ideology, often rely less on actual enforcement than on the belief that enforcement is possible. The guillotine was perhaps history's most literal embodiment of this principle. A single machine in a public square reshaped an entire society. Thank you for watching this exploration of how the guillotine's fear changed behavior during the French Revolution. If you found this examination of history's obscure details compelling, please like this video and subscribe for more documentaries that look beyond the obvious to understand how and why things worked the way they did. What other historical objects or practices would you like to see examined through this lens? Share your thoughts in the comments. History's most interesting lessons often hide in the details we overlook. Until next time, remember that the past isn't just about what happened. It's about how people adapted, survived, and changed in response to the forces around them.